All right, thanks for everyone coming to today's session. My name is Ben Reeder, and today we're going to talk about authentication in Azure. My amazing title, No Password, No Problem, Secure Azure Authentication with M-Cell and PowerShell. So let's just get right in. We've got a lot of demos that we need to get through. So again, as always, many thanks to the sponsors. I work for PatchMyPC, so I'm very prone to saying we're a great company. But everyone here is really helping to make this conference what it is. So if you haven't hung out at the vendor booths, please go and say hi to everyone. They're all very friendly. Okay, just a little bit about me in case no one knows. My name is Ben Reeder. I am a power state fluctuator at PatchMyPC. Sometimes they let me press buttons. Sometimes that is good. Mostly it is bad. These are the things that I am primarily on. I am on Twitter. I run a blog that I very rarely update, which I need to sort out. And I have all of my code, including the stuff that we're going to look at today, on my GitHub, but it will also be on the conference repository. So it will take a couple of days for that to come up, but I promise you it will be there. The code is there right now. If you're smart enough to get onto my tabs, not spaces repo, you'll be able to see the code that is going to be there anyway. All right. So as I said, we're primarily going to be focusing on how can we authenticate in a sort of a cloud native environment, avoiding the pitfalls of passwords. Because as this statement says, passwords leak, security is hard. So, you know, we're human and we're prone to fail. Computers only fail when humans are involved, and humans are almost always involved, so computers always fail. So let's try and simplify the risk of leaking passwords just by never using them, never storing them in code. And this is hopefully what we're going to try and I'm going to try and press on you guys today. Okay, first of all, I just want to point out just a small, you know, if we all had drinks, I'd pour one out. mcell.ps has been retired. It is no longer being maintained. It was never an official first-party module, but it was the best module for authenticating and doing native things with Graph. Instead of using the modules that Microsoft use, like mggraph and things like that, which have their place, mcell.ps was this fantastic module that was written by someone at Microsoft unofficially, and it has now sort of been retired because there's simply too many new features that have come out in the last couple of months or last couple of years for that to be a full-time thing. It's very upsetting for me. Weirdly, it was my favorite module in the gallery. It's still obviously available, but all of the shiny new features will not be added. So unless someone wants to take it over and maintain it, I know the community, yes. There we go. Okay. So just for everyone in the recording, the author left Microsoft, which is potentially why it's been retired. There are a lot of great community authentication modules coming out. One of the reasons that I do this session is to hopefully try and convince Microsoft that there is a place for a first-party authentication library for PowerShell, because there is for .NET, obviously, for Python, for JavaScript. You can just get these and just work with them. There isn't one for PowerShell. The current recommendation is simply use the module authentication. There's reasons why that's really bad, and I'm going to show you in a demo in a second. But, you know, if anyone's listening that has the ability to enact change, we need a first-party PowerShell authentication module for Azure and M-Cell. Okay, on M-Cell, one of the questions I get a lot, and this is a somewhat redacted comment that I had on my GitHub, where someone simply said, is there a way to avoid M-Cell and just use connect-mg-graph? No, because mg-graph uses M-Cell. You cannot get away from M-Cell. M-Cell is the library for authentication. There are ways that you can do native authentication, which in a previous session I called raw dogging the internet. Just don't. It's messy. It's prone to failure. M-Cell is it just does everything for you. It caches the tokens. It does everything for you. So my answer to this is basically no. Just learn to love M-Cell and move on. Okay, so again, just a really quick summary. So, you know, authentication isn't hard. Hands up who actually deals with writing code for authentication on a regular basis. Okay, there's about half of you here. Okay, so for everyone else, I'm going to show you like the absolute sort of very skeleton concept of like how that authentication works. So hopefully next year when I do something similar to this, there's going to be more people with their hands up. Then we're going to talk a little bit about what the problem is. We've kind of already touched on it a bit. And then what options we have. And then we're just going to do a whole lot of demos. Okay. So authentication isn't hard. This is a great tweet that came out a little while ago that essentially, have you ever hesitated to try out an API from Azure, AWS, or Google because you thought that essentially API credentials was difficult? Who here tried to do something and just got scared by auth and gave up? Okay, so not that many, which is fantastic. But just out of curiosity, more than 70% of the people, there was like 4,900, has gone up considerably. And that yes is there. It's really, really big. So what I want to try and show you right now, I'm just going to check. Yep, there we go. I'm going to hop out of this and just show you how simple authentication is or can be in the most native PowerShell way that I can. One of the big things is that M-Cell is a .NET library. So PowerShell is built on .NET. So we can just write .NET. One of the jokes that I always say is if you start learning PowerShell, you're about halfway to becoming a C# developer. Whether you like it or not, that's basically what you're going to do. So once you start writing complicated PowerShell, you start realizing, well, I need to access these classes. And then all of a sudden you start writing your own classes. And then, what are overrides? Now you're a C# developer. So what we're going to do is just sort of show you an example code of how we can actually just interact directly with the M-Cell library in PowerShell. So how is that visibility-wise? I can make it a little bigger. I'm not going into light mode, so I apologize in advance. Okay, so first things first, what I've got here in this library is I've created a very basic C# project simply so that I can pull down the libraries that I need. This is probably going to be overwhelming for anyone that's never done this, but that's why I have this example. You can use this. It's free, so you can actually get the M-Cell libraries and keep them up to date for yourself. I'm not building a C# program. I'm simply creating a CS proj file with the libraries that I want so that I can get them. You could manually download them as well, but let's use the tools we've got. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add that library that I've already got on my machine. So just add type so that it's in my environment. And why is that not working? Because I am in directly. All right, let's try that again. No? Okay, we're off to a great start. Let's go. Auth AZ functions. It's because I'm in the wrong folder. There we go. Auth is easy. That should be right. There we go. Much better. Okay, so I've got a couple of things here. We all know what variables are. I'm adding my client identity, my tenant ID, which just for everyone's sake, tenant ID can be the GUID or the on Microsoft or your vanity domain. It doesn't matter. It's the same thing. So we're just going to go ahead and F8 that. I'm going to add some scopes. For anyone that doesn't use Graph a lot, if you're using Graph API permissions in your app registration, you can just straight up call this and it will get all of the necessary permissions you've configured in your app registration so that you don't need to list the ones that you want. Obviously, if you've created an app reg, you've set the API permissions that you want already, you want them. There's scenarios where maybe you want a subset of those things, but most of the time you want everything that you've set up already. This makes it very easy for you. So I'm just going to load that in. Okay, so far so good. I'm going to go through now the auth flow. So let me just shrink this out. It gets a little difficult because I've got to change some stuff. Okay, so as I said, I loaded a .NET library with M-Cell. So I'm now just basically going to load that and I'm going to create an app. So the app is essentially a container that has all of the permissions and scopes and configuration for what you're going to do with your authentication, but it doesn't actually do it. It just creates this object that you can then say, please, can I have a password? So we're just going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to create with the client ID, with an authority, which is just login Microsoft Online, my tenant. If it was a multi-tenant, we would set that to common. And then I'm just going to say with my default redirect URI, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to build that. F8. All right. So now I've got this client. I can actually look and see what this looks like. Let me just clear this public client app. So it's not super exciting, but let me just bring this up here. So we don't get much, but system web view available, what's the app config, user token cache. It shows you where the tokens are stored. This is just what the M-Cell object is that we're going to be working with. Okay. Then we're going to go ahead and because PowerShell doesn't really do async calls, we're just going to cheat a little bit. All of these libraries and methods are designed for .NET, so they're all by default async. So we're just going to go ahead and say, in our public client app, we want to acquire the token interactively with that generic sort of magic scope that I've got here. I'm going to execute it async, and then I'm going to cheat by saying, well, I'm going to wait until I get that response back, and then I'm going to get the result, and then I'm going to do the thing that I need to do with it. I'm going to flag right now that this laptop, the laptop that I hate immensely, is having some problems with Edge, so I've changed my default browser, so we're going to find out whether it works. Yeah, that's how much confidence I have in this. Okay, it's looking good so far. We have my lovely Brandy. That's fantastic. So everyone's seen this, right? You go in, you run a PowerShell script, whether it's one you've done yourself or you're just using mggraph. It's just popped up and it's asking who you are. So I'm just going to go ahead and use my PowerShell account. I'm going to enter my password. Thank you. And we're going to do the nope, incorrect. Let's do this. Ben at PowerShell, copy. Yep. Oh, we're doing good so far, guys. All right, let's try this one more time. How are we going? Copy. There we go. Never trust LastPass. All right, we're going to do the auth dance. How many hours do you reckon you've wasted in a year just doing the auth dance? Yeah. Okay, so I just got this generic prompt, authentication complete. You can return to the application. This isn't super fun. Interactive auth is kind of lame. Hopefully you're all here for the big shiny thing I'm going to show at the end, which gets rid of that. Okay, so let's just go ahead and make this full screen just so I can show you what we've got. So I've just spat out my token that exists in a variable, but I've got, my access token, my ID token, things like that. So, I've authenticated, and hopefully I can show you if I bring this back. If anyone thinks this is complicated, next year you won't if you come back to this conference, because, as Rob Sewell said, we're in the top tier of people who use PowerShell. And if this is overwhelming, speak with me and I will explain it more in depth after this. And I promise you by next year, you're not going to be concerned. But, I've basically created an object with all the parameters and stuff that I need to get a token. And then I've just said, please, can I have a token? And it's gone and done the thing with my interactive process, and it's spat it back out. What I can do with this now is, with that token, a very, very boring example, I can just go in and I'm basically just going to do an invoke web request or an invoke REST method. I'm going to go ahead and just grab some information about myself, because this is a very basic scenario. I'm going to go F8, and we can bring this up. And we can see I got a response back, and I hit the beta endpoint, so I got a lot of data. But we can see, information, who am I, where do I live, what's my email address, things like that. So, that's what we use the token for. Hopefully everyone understands that. So that's pretty simple. The early thing that I did mention about creating the CS Proj library to get those libraries that you need to do the thing. You can do this in kind of PowerShell as well. It's not really, it's just the .NET CLI. So if you've got any kind of .NET SDK, it should be .NET 8 until .NET 9 comes out, because we all use the shiny new toys here. We just create a new console application. We add a couple of different things. This comment here is for the next demo that I'm going to show you, but all you really need is Microsoft Identity Client. That is M-Cell. The other things are to let me do some fun new things that don't exist natively in the M-Cell library. And then you just go ahead and build it. And then those libraries just exist in the folder. If I go into auth is easy, and then I go into bin and debug and runtimes, I can then see all the DLLs that I have. And that's it, right? And I just use this so that periodically I'll just rebuild it and get the latest version of these libraries, and then just play around and see what's new. You can obviously also step into learning C# now that you've created a project, and you can play around with that stuff. It's a really good stepping stone. So I'm just going to keep my timer going, which I didn't start. Okay, cool. So everyone, question?
Instead of building it in .NET, why wouldn't you just add the
Okay, so that's a really good question. So the question was, instead of just building this like quasi, please get my library project, why don't I just use like the AZ module or something like that? So this, there is a module that it just exists simply to get those library files for you. The main reason that I don't do that is because that relies on someone else to maintain that. And I'd rather, like, especially for demo world where I want to use the shiny new things, I don't want to be reliant on someone else having to do that. Obviously it's open source and you can contribute, but like it's very easy to do it yourself. One of the other reasons why I sort of point to this being, super critical to have a first party library in PowerShell is there's a real problem when has anyone tried to load different versions of a .NET library into PowerShell? Yeah. How'd you go? Not great, right? Yeah, cool. So think about all of the different first-party modules that exist that work with Azure natively, things like the AZ tools, nggraph. They have to be exactly in line. Otherwise, you're going to have problems. The real-world effect of this has been proven where if you have your own function or your own set of modules that do things with graph and AZ, whichever one you hit first loads that library, and then the second one fails. This is a very, very big problem, and it's very, very known, and it's super easy to fix. Again, someone pay attention. All you need to do is simply have a M-Cell module, and then all of the other first-party projects or modules can simply reference off that like every other language in the world, and then we can solve that problem once and for all, and then we can just use this and do cool things. So, great question. Okay.
And
yes.
Just a comment, you can also use PS resource get to download the NuGet package of Microsoft Identity Client.
Fantastic. So the statement was you can also use the PS resource get to pull these libraries down. So there's a bunch of different ways. At the end of the day, it's just a NuGet library. So if you know how to get that, there's a bunch of different ways you can do it. This is just the way that I'm super confident with, but that's fantastic, and I might add that to my next time I do this. Okay, so we're all good. This is very simple, right? PowerShell is great. We can authenticate. Let's quickly go back to my slide if I can find it. Someone convinced me to try using PPSX, and it's going to hurt me because I can't go back to the. Yep, there we go. Okay. So as I said, auth is relatively easy. But we're not here to talk about how easy auth is. We're here to talk about how can we remove passwords from that scenario, or in scenarios where we're hard coding values for authentication, how can we stop hard coding values? Because one of the biggest things that happens with when you start writing solutions for companies or for your clients is that you will generate an app registration and you'll generate a client secret, and then you'll put that in your library, and then you'll put that into GitHub, and then you realize what you've done. Credential leakage. Someone comes in, looks at your repo, sees a password. They've now got full access to whatever that app registration lets them do, and they can steal your beer. That's not good. We don't like beer theft, although that might change tonight. Who knows? Okay, but what's the other issue? Because obviously this just takes up one part of the screen. So cloud services have increased the attack surface area so that now we're at risk of doing something like this. And we don't like that. All right. So now just think about all of the different cloud native things that you're building. So things like Azure Functions, container apps, things in Kubernetes that all have their own passwords. We could obviously put these things in Key Vault and then we can reference them out. But what it essentially means is that instead of just having this one little thing that exists in one computer, in our on-prem environment, we've now got hundreds of little microservices that all need a password. So that becomes a bigger problem. So this credential leakage problem becomes significantly larger in the cloud native world. So we really need to try and figure out a way that we can eliminate us being human, because I've done it. I did it when I literally committed this code and I had to delete the repository and start again. So like it's not something that just new people to the industry do. This is a common problem. So we're going to try and figure out how we can solve that. So again, what options do we have? Well, there's a few. I've broken it into 3. And as I said before, we're going to look at this one, but we're not going to touch on it too much because I think everyone kind of knows how it works. But we're going to break this up. Okay, so what options as far as passwordless? So we've got service principals, but as I said, service principals rely on a client secret, and we put those things in code and then we forget about them, and then there's a problem. So it's not great. Managed identities are cooler. Managed identities are basically the same thing as a service principal, but Microsoft and Azure look after the authentication for you. They use certificates, which is significantly better than a client secret, but they actually rotate the certificate for you, and you never need to think about it. So you attach that to your resource, and it just works. It's fantastic. You can control the scope of it. You can add your Graph API permissions. You can do all these things. You never need to think about what that password is, so you never put it in your code. So if your workload, so the thing that you're doing is in Azure and you're not using managed identities yet, stop what you're doing. Come and talk to me, and I can show you how to change that, because managed identities will save you. What about if the thing that we're doing is not directly in Azure? Well, we have a couple of options there. Again, we have service principals. The example that I'm going to show is in ADO, or Azure DevOps. So, again, we can just create a service principal, get that secret, put it in there. The problem with that is, again, secrets are bad. They also expire. So now you're going to have a workload that's running like a pipeline, and it's just going to fail for, as the one day that you go on leave, it's going to expire, and then no one's going to be able to help, and you're going to lose your job. Maybe not that bad. Then we have managed identities. Again, much better. You don't have to worry about the secret, and it just works. But we've got this new fun thing called workflow identities, which builds off this concept called OIDC. What this essentially does is the workload that is running in a service that you trust has an identity. Azure's sitting over here. With workflow identities, you can simply say, hey, I'm a trusted environment. Can I please have a token? And it goes, yeah, I know who you are. And it just gives you a token. So you can create an app registration without a client secret, without a certificate. So literally no way to use it. But this resource sitting over here that you trust and is secure can get a token for you. And it's fantastic. So I'm going to show a demo on that. Then we've got, well, what if I'm just doing things locally and I need to do it interactively? Not everything can be an incredible silent cron job or service task or whatever. So we've got a couple of different options for that. So again, service principals, that's boring. This is local interactive authentication, or like local things that you're running. Absolutely. This is where we put our secrets most of the time. This is where most of the security vulnerabilities come from. Then we've got another option, interactive auth, which we saw, but it's kind of boring. I don't want to click on things. I don't want to do the auth dance. I just want it to work. So then we've got this thing called a Wham broker. Does anyone know what a Wham broker is? There's one person at the back that put their hand up, a couple of people at the front, but okay. So aside from being a terrible joke that I was going to do about the band Wham, Wham broker is an acronym, one of our favorite 3-letter acronyms, called Web Account Manager, and it has been on our machines for a while. Yes, I got a thumbs up. Okay, it's been there for a while, but it's never really been in use or publicly available for us to ingest and work. Essentially what it does is it gets the identity of the person who's logged into the computer and just says, well, I'm trusted in Azure, or I'm trusted in my tenant. Can I have a token? And it goes, yeah, and it gives you a token. No passwords. If I've got access to my machine, I can get a token and I can do the work for me. It is incredible, and the demo just works so well that you're not going to understand what you're looking at. So, okay, we're going to go through all of these things. As I said, the workload in Azure or other cloud platform, we're at a point now where I think most people know what managed identities are and they're using them. I'm just going to show you the boilerplate thing that I use for all of my function apps, so you can take a photo of it, do whatever you need to do, and you can talk to me about it later. And then we're just going to focus on these two, because how are we going with time? It's not bad. It's not too bad. Okay. Let me go through this crazy thing. All right. So locally, just on my machine, I do have this working, but like, there's no point. Like it just works so seamlessly that it doesn't really matter. But so, okay. So if I go into Azure Functions, requirements, where's my run in get devices? Okay. This little block from line 6 to 20 is just my generic thing that I use whenever I'm writing like a proof of concept app registration or Azure function rather. Essentially what it does is once you set up a managed identity in an Azure function or really any service, it puts the identity information in this environment variable, which is MSI secret. So all we're doing is, hey, if this is running in Azure and I've configured managed identities, can I has token, and it just gets it for you. If I'm running it locally and my laptop's not Azure Arc connected, well, then I don't get a managed identity because that thing only lives in Azure. So I just fail out of that, and then I try to authenticate in a different way. And this is again using App ID and client secret, which is again not preferred, but in a local dev environment with Azure Functions, that stuff gets stored in a file called local.settings.json, which is by default never actually stored in your Git commit history. So you can just chuck that stuff in, test around, and then delete it, or you never lose your laptop and you should be fine. So like this will allow you to test locally. And then when you deploy it to production, you can just leverage the MSI, so you never actually need to store that secret anyway. So that's a really fantastic way to do it. And I'll just point out, for anyone that wants to take a very quick screenshot, what this looks like. Passwords. Very bad, not good. So this is why we don't want to use this sort of stuff, because this file might not be committed, but if I leave this on a train or I decide to take it to the event tonight, someone could take it, someone could figure out what it is, and they could do mean things to me. So this is why we don't want to do it. Is everyone okay with that? Does anyone have any questions on that code? No. Excellent. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move over to that second thing. So the workflow or the thing we're going to do is not directly in Azure. How do I get that token? So let me go over here. I've got a couple of examples here. Pipeline demo. I almost look like I'm prepared. This is pretty cool. All right. All right. So let me just go straight back here. Loading identity providers. It's going to make me sign in. Of course it is. Just have a quick sip of water. All right, we're going to pop into PSConf EU 2024 demos. Hi, Matthias. I wonder what that's about. Oh, look at that. It's young Matthias. Isn't that beautiful? Okay. This repository does nothing. This is just a place that I want to have an Azure pipeline to run. And I want to be able to do graphy things with my pipeline. The real world application of what I'm showing you is silly, but the concept is very real. And this is something that you guys can use. So I'm just going to pop into my pipeline and I'm going to show you what it looks like. So what I'm doing here is I'm simply in my pipeline that literally does nothing. I'm creating an agent runner, and I'm going to authenticate to graph, and I'm just going to get some data. In a real world, this is probably not something that we would do, but if you have something in Azure that you need to do, I have a great example of I created a very terrible internal tool to just manage semantic versioning of packages that we create. That all lives in there. I need a token to access that. So, this is how I do it. I'm using a task called Azure CLI, which is a first-party tool that essentially allows me to run PowerShell things with the identity of Azure in it. So what I've got here is I've got a subscription, an auth token called PSConf work item. If I go into CLI and just show you what that looks like, so when we create it for the first time, what it's looking for is an Azure Resource Manager connection. If you don't have one of these, it'll automatically show you a sign-in screen just here instead of a drop-down. The problem with the sign-in screen, as I found out this morning, is it creates a service principal with a secret, which expires. We see the problem here. Now, I believe that ADO does manage and renew that for you, but it's still, it's still a thing. And it's still a secret that can be leaked, and someone can then do things for you. So I'm just going to really quickly show you how we actually go ahead and create the correct workload identity service connection. So once we're in the repository or the project that we're working on, we just want to go into the options. We want to pop down to service connections. and we're going to create a new service connection. We're going to select Azure Resource Manager, and this is where it gets really cool. This is a tiered list of what is recommended for authentication. And note that Workload Identity Federation Automatic is there by default. This is the recommended way to do Azure things in your pipelines or sort of anything in ADO. Because what this will actually do is, because OIDC and Workload Identity can be a little tricky to sort of understand, but if you don't need to, then it's just going to do it for you. So you can just go ahead and hit next, and it's going to build it up. I've already done that, so I can just show you what this looks like. One of the neat things is once you've created the connection, you can just go ahead and select Manage Service Principal. It's going to take you into Azure, which will probably make me auth. I shouldn't complain about auth in an auth session, should I? But I will. I may already have this open, but it's fine. Come on. Okay, so it's going to create this. So one thing that I'm going to flag, I manually renamed the connection that's created. By default, it has a generic, like the project that you created, and then the tenant ID. And if you have multiple service connections in the same project, it's the same name. So it gets a little messy. So what I'd recommend is when you create it for the first time, click on that link to go into Azure and just go ahead, go into branding and properties, and just rename it just for your own benefit. I'm using this specifically for this one pipeline. You don't necessarily have to do that, but just give it a name that you understand, because otherwise you're going to end up with 50 and you're not going to know what you're working with. The only real thing of value to show, because again, show of hands, everyone's created an app registration, right? Fantastic. I'm so glad I don't have to talk about that anymore. Okay, we go into certificates and secrets. We've all probably seen this, but we don't know what it is. This federated credential, this is the magic sauce that sort of makes this work. So, ADO has an identity, and it's trusted because I created the connection from ADO. So I have access. I have access to Azure, connects it all up. I have no certificates. I have no client secrets. I just have this federated credential. This doesn't have a password in it. This has nothing. This is just, how do I go to that external resource and verify who I am? Or the other way around. It's the identity centered to Azure and, all that magic stuff. This man over in the back, Emmanuel, will be able to explain exactly how this stuff works a lot more than me. I just think it's really neat. So I'm going to show you. Okay, so configuration is literally just the issuer, the subject identifier, and that's kind of it. And again, this is a little bit complicated, but if you do it in things like ADO, I believe GitHub has a nice solution to automatically create this stuff as well. So if you're doing things in Actions in GitHub, you can also leverage this.
It's directly integrated, so you can select directly.
Fantastic. So the statement there is it's directly integrated with Azure and GitHub, because obviously, they're good friends, so they like to connect those sort of things. ADO is obviously still, it's still doing these things as well. It's just hidden behind a couple of different panes of glass, but it's all there. Okay, so this is configured. It's configured. We go in. Let me just do a brain check here. Auth, make sure I've got all of my internet's running nice and fast, which is great. Yeah, I just have one. So device read all. So super exciting. Let's go in here. And I'm going to go back to demos and into my pipeline. First, we're just going to say hi to Matthias. Hey, Matthias. I hope you're not too hungover. We're going to go into pipelines. And we're going to run this. See that big green tick? That was me testing it just before. So I'm fairly confident this is going to work. And now we're going to do the thing that everyone loves doing who works in DevOps and writes pipelines. We're going to watch the pipeline run, which is like watching logs. So we're just going to go ahead. We're going to let this happen. I promise you this is very exciting. Does anyone have any questions around workload identities while we're waiting for this? Okay, you're all stunned. Fantastic. All right, so we're in Azure CLI task now. We're going to go through. We're actually going to start seeing a couple of things because I've configured it in a way that it actually displays stuff about the actual identity. It's already done. That's fantastic. If I go back into my Azure CLI, And we scroll back through here. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger. So we can see here, this is the cloud name, my tenant ID, all that sort of stuff, all that fun stuff. We can see the username and, all of the things, but we don't actually have the secret being displayed on the screen. But if we scroll down here, I can see, well, I found 21 devices and I've got all this information, which means I got a token and I did a thing with Graph, and at no point did I configure a password or any way for anyone to manually go in and run this and do nefarious things. So if you're working in ADO and you're not using this, stop, change it. If you go into the settings, it will literally say, we recommend that you move your services to workload identities. So if you're having problems with them, come and see me. It's fantastic. It's very easy to migrate. Question?
Just a comment. I think in ADO, it's already a thing that they recommend you migrate with the tool.
Absolutely correct. So yes. So the statement was yes, ADO will, if you go into these settings, if it's already a service principal, it's going to say, we strongly recommend that you change this. Question?
So I have an offline environment without synchronized users or anything like that, and I need to run a scheduled task with PowerShell regularly that does something in Graph. What would be the best solution for authentication there?
So the question is, on your machine, you have a local account that isn't directly synchronized with AD, but you need to do Graph things. Find a better environment. No, there are absolutely ways that you can do those things. Generally, what I would recommend is if you need to do them on your machine, rethink what you're doing. If the identity that you need to get a token from is not on your machine, then why is it running on your machine in the first place? I'm not trying to sound mean or facetious. I'm just there's a scenario where you maybe need to sit down and rethink where the actual workload needs to run. And if that identity isn't directly available to you for security reasons, okay, well, let's do it somewhere else. And that's where things like Azure Automation, Azure Functions, things like that come into play. But we can absolutely talk more about that after the session. Was there another question? No? Silence? Okay, great. So workload identity. So we've now got, we've removed passwords from a couple of pretty common scenarios. We've got a little bit of time, so we get to play with the fun stuff now. So again, now we're going to talk about Wham. I don't actually know any Wham songs. Did they do Last Christmas? I'm not gonna sing that for you. That's terrible. Okay, so let's just close this. So just to remind everyone, auth is easy. Yeah, it's 4 lines of code. It's configured. We're going to do the same thing, but we're going to implement Wham. So again, the scenario here is because I'm on a work computer, I can't do this in my demo tenant. So I'm in kind of my dev tenant at work, but I just want to point out one important thing before I show you how this works. Any app registration that you have can be configured to use Wham, Web Account Manager, Wham. All you need to do is set up a mobile and desktop application redirect URI, which is this. It is, and the ID here that we're looking at is the app ID of the app registration. The important part is this. MS AppX Web Microsoft AD Broker plugin. This is what Wham uses as its redirect URI. It's sitting there waiting for a response from this. Once you set this up, your app registration is now ready to use Wham. Okay? Does that all make sense? All right. So, auth is easy. We know this. I'm going to save that. Auth is fun. All of these things are going to be in the wrong path. Auth, okay, I just need to drop this. Okay, so in the Auth is Easy demo, you saw that I just had that identity client DLL. In this one, I have those extra libraries that I was talking about that because this stuff is new, it's not native. Yeah, woo! Okay. That just scared me. I'm running out of a little bit of time. Okay, so we've got these libraries. They're not native. There's a couple of things we need. Again, the code is available. I'm just going to load these up. Okay, I've got my client ID, my tenant ID, my redirect URI, again, as we said, it's the Apex URI, and we've got our default scopes. I'm just going to go ahead and load these in. We're going to create a broker option, which is literally saying, hey, I'm running this on a Windows machine. At the moment, Windows is the only thing that supports this. I'm sure that this will change. So we're just going to go ahead and select F8. Okay. And then we're going to add into that broker or the public client application, we're going to add an OS identity, which is essentially saying this is going to run at the operating system account so that I can analyze who's logged in and get that identity and do the things I need to do. So I'm just going to hit F8. I'm not running this in admin at the moment. This is not a thing that requires administration. This is just saying when the broker is called, how am I going to figure out who's actually logged in? Then we're just going to go through and do the same thing that we did before. So we're going to create the app with the authority. This is just another way that you can create that authority URL. And then the redirect URI. I'm not using the default. I'm putting my own specific one in. And then I'm adding one extra step. Note that I didn't have the .build for anyone that's actually paying attention to the code, because we have to inject the broker into this so that it will work. So I'm using the broker extension with broker, and then I'm injecting the public client app with the broker options, which is literally just that I'm running on a Windows machine. That sounds complicated. I fully understand. This is just what is called an extension method, and PowerShell doesn't really support it, so you have to do some janky stuff to get it working. So we're just going to go ahead and press F8. Then we're going to build. And then, how can I do this? I'm just going to scroll this all the way to the top. I'm going to run this. I have a token. Just to show that this isn't a trick, because, everyone lies. Reload window. Come on, be faster. Cool. Go all the way up here. Am I in the right path? Yes, I am. F8. Oh, come on. I'm so close. I'm so close. Oh, I hate this laptop so much. I'd normally do this on a Mac, but last year I had some problems, and you can't do Wham on a Mac, so it's an issue. Is this going to work? Is this going to work? Hello, Ben. Okay, cool. Let's just run this. Yep, it's running now. Straight away, I got my token. It just works. It just goes through. And just to prove that the average that I've created here lets me do things that I need to do, again, we'll do a really boring. I'm just going to go ahead, get the information about me. F8. It's spitting back all of the information about me without ever storing a password. Awesome. Okay, so we have 2 minutes. Question. Who's allowed to use the app registration?
It seems like by utilizing the web broker, like everyone, the domain is able to use the app registration.
So that's a really good question, and thank you for reminding me that I did not talk about this. What we've created now is essentially a way to get a token and do whatever that app registration does for anyone who can log into this machine or has an account in your company. That's not good. Did I just create a virus? Maybe. What you now need to do, now that you've created a really, really easy way to authenticate, is you now need to scope and control who can get access to those things. So that is where, for every app registration that you create, whether it be single tenant or multi-tenant, there is a backing enterprise application that you can then scope down and say, only Ben can use this, or only this group can use this. So that you have now created a thing that is very easy to get a token. It's your responsibility now to make sure that only the people that can do this or should be able to do it can do it. The real world application of this is incredible. Think about your desk side support team. You can deploy a script that does general things, scope down the access so that only they can use it, they can create their identity, go in, run this code, and it will work. And if the end user tries to run it, nothing will happen. The auth will fail. Think about scenarios that we shouldn't be thinking about. Logon scripts. No one should be doing them. Everyone is. You can create an app registration for a logon script that just uses that user. You can get that identity, and then you can do the things that you need to do to get those hard-coded X drive for finance nonsense that we should not be doing. Sorry, this is triggering a lot of pain for me. But so the idea here is that, yes, this is very dangerous in the wrong hands, but we're all professionals here, maybe except for Scott. You're welcome. So, we need to now think about the security implications of that. But yeah. Question?
Why do you write your own application code instead of using Connect AZ account or AZ login or Connect MG Graph?
So the question was, why do I write my own authentication instead of using one of the dozens of first-party authentication platforms? So I kind of answered that earlier, primarily because I do a lot of work with the AZ module and the MG Graph module and other things, and PowerShell doesn't really handle different types or versions of those libraries, and they are currently out of sync. So I need to be able to trust the library or the authentication thing that I'm using is not going to cause problems if I'm doing workloads that require different modules. So, and this goes back to my thing that the last thing I'm going to say is if someone from Microsoft can enact this change, what we should do is create a first-party PowerShell module like mcell.ps wasn't, and then all the AZ libraries and all of the MG libraries and all of these other things should simply just inherit from that. And then we never have to have this problem. And then I'll never have to talk about authentication again because it'll be done correctly.
When you're dealing with your own access, you get in this way, then you need to take care of a refresh token and all the other stuff as well.
Yes. So the statement there was doing this manually does involve more management yourself. Absolutely. I mean, we're in the right conference to over-engineer solutions in PowerShell, right? But at the end of the day, I just like knowing how these things work. Would I write my own internal authentication solution for something that everyone at the company was going to use? Probably, but that's just what I do. M-Cell is really good at managing the state of that token and handling the refresh and doing everything as well. If you've already got a token and you just run it again, it grabs inside the cache and just refreshes it for you. So it doesn't have to always go out to the internet to get a brand new token. It's got the refresh token. It'll just do it for you. So M-Cell makes it easier for me to write my own things. But yes, absolutely. This is why, I don't really want to write my own things, but I don't want to rely on having to download. Who's downloaded AZ Star? Who's created an Azure function that you've set the required modules to AZ Star? In a consumption function and waited, 20, 30, 40 minutes for it to pull everything down? It's just, I don't want to be specific with this. I just want to get a token so that I can do the things that I want to do instead of, this team, quite rightly, they might have been doing it with the best intentions, but maybe what they think I want to do is not what I want to do. Graph is really easy, relatively. So just let me have a token and I'll figure out what I want to do. If I find later that there's a better solution that someone else is maintaining, fantastic. You've made my life easy. But at least in the early stages of prototyping something, I just want a token so that I can, scroll through Graph and see what I need. Awesome. All right. I think we are absolutely out of time. Thank you so much, guys. That was the last session for me.